Hello. So we are now on lesson 5 and or assignment 5. Or it's going to go over to we're going to go over hierarchy and typography on these lessons. So let's click on this link. And what it was hierarchy and typography, I think. Typography. Yep, hierarchy. So hierarchy is the organization or presentation of elements in a way that suggests importance. So DOM, document object model, that we talk about in JavaScript. That's a sort of sense of hierarchy. The arrangement and emphasis on a visible elements influence the order in which the human eye perceives what it's seeing. Establishing a focal point. An important function of hierarchy is to establish a point of focus by giving your customers an entrance point to begin navigating your product and leading them to critical information. Before addressing the hierarchy of your visual elements, understanding the importance of your content is key. So you cannot start prioritizing the appearance until you understand what's most important to your customers. So contrast is the difference between two things to the point that attention is drawn to the difference. So be color, typography, spacing, shapes, and so on. The prominence of some elements over others is the effective way to guide your audience through a story. For example, the title of a blog post gives context as to what the reader is going to get out of the body text. And to an extent, the title is there to convince the reader to read the post and then continue down the page and even continue reading to another post or page. The title or heading is often at the top of the visual and information hierarchy and pages online. The heading, subheading, and body text of almost every text-based web page is organized this way and is used to help tell the story of the page. The heading, or H1, is the most prominent object in the image below, as you can see here, followed by the subheading, and so on and so forth. The separating the different elements visually is easier for your readers to see the individual parts and move through them in a specific order. So, but creating a linear route is not the only option here. You can use contrasting elements to move the viewer's eye around the screen in many directions and patterns. So some refer to conventions like F and Z whenever they're scanning patterns. F or E patterns are generally used for forms and dashboards or text and pages. The image for Slack's homepage down here is a Z shape. Other ways to draw attention from your audience and guide the journey is through color, size, type, style, shapes, etc. For example, emphasis can be created on tints of color shown in the grid. So all but one image is black and white, then the color image demands more attention. Gestalt principles. We established that hierarchy is used to prioritize visual elements to organize information into recognizable patterns. Gestalt principles, or the principle of grouping, are psychological understanding of how we as humans interpret this information. Our minds identify patterns in which we see and experience. Psychologists group these perceptions in 5 categories: proximity, similarity, continuity, closure, and connectedness. Since the original definition and categorization of Gestalt principles, there are many additional categories identified. So proximity is the closeness or the nearness. Similarity is the association of the same elements or elements. Past experience is the understanding of what is in front of someone based off what that person has experienced in the past. So in the previous lesson, they referred to like the hamburger button. I guess it was introduced with Facebook. I don't think I realized that. But people are more familiar with it and their past experience. The continuity is the repetition of the pattern. So in it's the preview. We have repetition on some patterns. We have the repetition of like the colors. Excuse me. The repetition of the logo and the menu up on top. So we have some repetition where it applies. Closure has a pattern with an incomplete object that implies that the pattern continues outside a composition. Connectedness is when two or more objects are in contact with each other, with either direct contact or contact through another object, like a line. So I don't think I have any good examples that you could actually see. We have these lines, but that's not going to be on the app. Yeah, I don't see anything there that would kind of fall under that category. Simplicity, it is our preference for objects that are simple, ordered, and clear. Figure grounded, relationships are meeting white space and negative space to balance or unbalance a composition. Symmetry is a mirror image or layout where if a line was drawn down the middle, perhaps horizontally or vertically, but possibly on a diagonal, the layout is the same in each direction. So you can't emphasize everything. If everything is bold, nothing is bold. We saw that before. Use these elements of contrast and just selectively and with the purpose to draw attention to what's most important. If you're unsure which element has prominence, close one eye, step back from your screen, and unfocus your vision. Or if you're me, just take off your glasses. You can step away from your design for a day or two to gain perspective. I do that often. And then one of the best ways is to show your design to another person. I don't always do that, but this one I definitely do. Yeah. Writing. So that's on hierarchy, and there was another one as part of this. What was it? Was it typography? Yeah, it's typography. So typography was next, if I remember correctly. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, typography. Let's go ahead and click there. Typography. Working with type can be intimidating with tons of choices, potential use cases, and terminology in the print industry. So if you're coming to design from anywhere at a printing studio, and it can be hard to catch up quick. So this is going to be an introduction. Typography can evoke emotion and convey attention or message in itself. Typography is about clear, quality communication with readability being a critical factor when setting type. There is also learn and understand about type, and there are books out there. Picking a typeface. Typefaces are often chosen for what they say before the words set in them are ever read. Companies usually select typefaces for the brand to match their style or desired customer perceptions. Like looking at the bookstore. I don't know if you noticed or not, but the typography, what's it? I can't remember. It's called Courier Sans or whatever it is. I don't remember what it is, but it's the font with green. The type. I would not do that. Not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I wouldn't do it. You know, sometimes design and what people like is kind of subjective. And my subjective opinion, I would not do that. All these different colors, all these different kind of fonts, all this different caps, all this. Yeah, no, we wouldn't do that. Okay, so since you may have started a project by writing or gathering content, it'll be easier to determine the voice and tone of your type as well. The brand's tone is intended to be professional and not lighthearted, then a serious typeface that's limited amount of decoration or extra flourish should be a good choice. So looking at these two examples, which seems more professional, this one. On the left with sans serif, which means there is no, the serifs, the little things that stick out like on Times New Roman. On the right side, it's more decorative with this almendra. So Roboto on the left looks cleaner and provides a sense of sterility, perhaps more identifiable with corporation. Almendra on the right is basically a calligraphy and doesn't represent Figma brand appropriately. A typeface that is too sterile may leave your viewers uninterested, so that's something to be aware of. It is definitely a balance, and one of the reasons there's so many different typefaces. A lot of typeface preference is subjective. That's what I was saying earlier. But you can help pick your typeface for its destination. Where is it going? Who's it going to? Is it worth considering your comparative research and mood board if you start there? Stop. A mood board might show you that you've already begun to consider a visual tone. And looking at comparable solutions during the research phase may demonstrate how others approach similar problems as well. Spotty. When exploring typeface options, you can start with fonts on your computer or hit the internet, such as Google Fonts. As you browse a font collection, flag any fonts that seem to be on brand or appropriate for your project. But those also stand out. You're looking for the overall construction of your letters. Once you have some fonts picked, try applying them in different situations. Here's a Figma file with a few type options to find out. So the Figma file above is a great way for exploring new typefaces. If you aren't currently working on a project, then this is an excellent opportunity to identify a website or app that you love and use their content to try out new typefaces. Once you have some content written or found another product to copy, start with the name of the product or brand and change it to a typeface you tested in exploration above. If it doesn't look right with the meaning of the word or the name set in the typeface, it's probably not the correct fit. Set the text to black with a white background and white on black background. If you've already selected or have been assigned a primary brand color, adjust the text so see how it looks. We'll talk about color in the color lesson, but there are some specific ideas to focus on when it comes to your text. Having subtle light color on a similar background is unfortunately a popular style, but the lack of contrast can make text hard to read, not just for individuals with low vision, but for everyone. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines has a set of grading standards for testing contrast on the web. There are many tools available for checking the contrast and a ratio of 2 colors. It talks about that stuff. For readability, aim for a higher highest score possible. It's important to understand because if you're going to spend your time finding the right typefaces for your project that work with the colors in your designs, it's best if people can see them. Yeah. All customizations for the purpose of accessibility, and we'll go more into accessibility later on in the course, can also make your text more aesthetic pleasing. You can increase readability by changing the size, weight, and spacing of your text. Combining typefaces can also increase hierarchy, visual interest, and give you access to more use cases. Customizing type. There are many elements of type that you can adjust as you design. Changing these parameters can help you fine-tune the look. So we just covered a bit about color above, which is one of the most commonly altered elements. So now we're going to talk about a little bit more. The opacity of text can be altered, which is basically how see-through it is. This can be helpful in creating some colors without diving into the color palette at all. Let's see. Kerning and Leading. The spacing around lines of text are commonly edited by a designer to increase legibility, add more white space, and to alter the aesthetics of a page. Fonts are constructed so that any 2 or more characters can be placed next to each other. Sometimes the space around the character is set in a way that looks further apart. Kerning is the process of adjusting that space between letters to make a distribution of letters and the space between them appear even. The goal is to make them seem evenly spaced, when looking at them, and often a designer will move letters closer and further apart to give the appearance. It takes a little time, but as a designer, you'll be able to develop a better sense of proper kerning. Leading in the adjustment of space between 2 lines of text vertically. Increasing or decreasing line height can help improve reduce readability. So let's see. Long lines of text, bold set types, typeset of small size, and sans serif typefaces may require more leading, which is more space in between. In a typeface, for example, Montserrat by Juliet and Studio are multiple styles and weights. So they're regular, bold, italic, and so on and so forth. A font is a file for installing and using a set of type in a particular weight and style. The typeface Montserrat is a font family of 18 fonts. Weight refers to the thickness of a letter stroke. A typeface can range in weights from hairline to ultra black and may have many fonts in between. Font style is the adjustment of the character or case, such as the italics and all caps. Letter case also refers to simply as case, and the distinction between smaller letters that are lowercase and larger letters like uppercase or capital letters. There's some clarification on some terminology. On the sizes, the setting and changing the size of type can be difficult decision. Depends greatly on the medium that the text will appear on. So is it going to be like we've been playing with here on a mobile phone, on an iPhone 11, I believe? Yeah. And so, but, we saw earlier in the earlier lessons that, whenever we try to see what that looks like on a different size screen, we don't have any kind of responsiveness. So as we're building the responsiveness in for larger screens, we're going to have to make larger font sizes. It's important to determine hierarchy with your type choices using size as one of the elements of emphasis. So in web development, some key sizes need to be defined, such as the heading, subheading, so on and so forth. But it may be helpful to begin with the body text size, as that is how front-end developers may implement it. So you can start with like the body text size. Say we're going to say the body of the paragraph is going to be 12 font. And we're going to judge, gauge how we're going to make the heading size based off on that. Because the website is most likely going to be made mainly of the body, the paragraph text, and not full of headings. So we want to start with the bulk of our content and then adjust all the other relative elements such as headings, H1, H2, H3, and so on and so forth, based upon the size of the paragraph. Okay, that's what I just now said in it. Details. A lot of typography is the little details and the nuances. For example, when laying out text, one of the aspects is to examine is the rag. The rag is an uneven edge of left and right aligned text. It can be manipulated by increasing and decreasing the width of a text box. When one or two words end up being at the end of a paragraph, it's typically called a widow, or at the beginning, it's called an orphan. Referring to a word of text in line as a widow or orphan is kind of a bummer, especially because I am an orphan. Okay. So we're going to call them danglies instead. As text boxes are added or adjusted to prevent danglies, the line length is being adjusted. For the body text in English, limiting line length to approximately 40 to 60 characters, including spaces and punctuation, is ideal for accessibility and readability. If line lengths need to be longer than 60 characters, increase the line height. One of the easiest ways to make a document or interface look and feel well designed is consistency. So say your app screen has a title and it's 100 pixels from the top of the frame to the screen. You want all the others to be the same. Guides and measurements are your friends here. We talked about the rulers. Consider the left side or vertical. Okay, we did that. Justification is a concept of alignment specific to blocks or lines of text. So it can be left justified, right justified, or full justified, or centered. Customer customization. Consider the readers of your text can often customize these parameters themselves, and that's a good thing. Don't resist it. Creating a pixel-perfect type specimen doesn't matter if it's not accessible. As overviewed in the conclusion lesson, your designs might be experienced through a screen reader or magnifier and someone that can't perceive colors in the same way as you do. So text should never be rendered as images. If an article of text was a picture, then the screen reader won't be able to read it. Customers can also edit text on the web, intentionally or not, with the font and zoom settings of browsers and mobile. That's why designers need to understand accessibility features like alt text, which is like part of image that we talked about as the review with HTML. It's all part of the customer experience. Alt text, short for alternative text, and also known as its alt tag, alt description, and alt attributes, is code within a web page or app used to provide a meaning description of what the image communicates. In programming, it should be applied to every image within the HTML code by including an alt tag. Type and letters have additional parameters that are generally not customizable for the designer. For example, set width is the width of the body of a letter plus the buffer space between them. From here, you can try to see what you learned about typography in the next session, designing your CV. Okay, so that was the end of lesson 5 on the lesson assignments 5. Assignment 5 lessons.